When people look at me now, perfectly composed in tailored suits, my name etched in gold on glossy magazine covers, they see confidence. They see someone who commands boardrooms and signs million-dollar contracts with an easy smile. But what they don't see is the quiet ache beneath it all. They don't see the little girl who stood alone in a glittering dining room on Christmas Eve, clutching a tray of steaming dishes, while the family she loved laughed without ever seeing her. My name is Lily Sullivan. I'm 32 years old, and for 15 long years I was my family's maid. Not officially, of course. Officially, I was the quiet daughter, the one who didn't quite shine like Sarah. That was my younger sister, the golden one, the bright one, the chosen one. She was born with the kind of easy charm that made people lean in to listen. And me, I was the one clearing plates behind her. Every holiday was the same. Christmas, Thanksgiving, birthdays, anniversaries didn't matter. I was always in the kitchen, not as a guest, not as a daughter, but as the unseen hands that made everything look effortless. While Sarah sat in her designer dresses, tossing her hair and soaking in everyone's praise, I sweated behind the stove. She entertained guests. I made sure they had something to eat. The truth is, I used to tell myself that it was love, that I was helping my family, that maybe if I kept giving and giving, they'd look up one day and actually see me. But they never did. I remember last Christmas Eve so clearly, it's almost as if the air itself was thinner that night. I was in my Manhattan apartment folding clothes into my suitcase, humming under my breath. It had been such a long year, exhausting but good. My company had grown more than I'd dared to dream when I started it. I'd just secured a major contract. My assistant had sent me the final numbers that morning, $2 million on the line with Pinnacle Hospitality. If I closed this deal, Stellar Events, my company, would be on the national map. I should have been feeling proud. I should have been dancing around my apartment with champagne. But old habits die hard. I folded each blazer, carefully pressing out invisible wrinkles, like I was still that girl trying to be perfect for a mother who never noticed. Then my phone rang. The caller ID flashed Mom. And just like that, my stomach tightened, that familiar, unshakable knot that always formed when her name appeared on my screen. I already knew this wasn't going to be a pleasant call. With my family, it never was. Lily? My mother's voice crackled through the line, sharp and imperious as ever. Cancel whatever silly plans you have for tomorrow. She didn't even say hello. Her tone was the same one she'd used on me since I was 17. A tone that left no room for refusal, no space for me to exist as anything other than the tool she needed. I kept folding my blazer anyway. It was the only thing that kept my hands from trembling. What's happening tomorrow? I asked, even though deep down I already knew. Sarah's hosting her networking group for Christmas Eve dinner. Very important people, Lily. 25 guests. Executives from Pinnacle Corporation. You'll need to arrive by noon to start cooking. 7 main courses, 10 sides. The menu's already planned. She said it like I was her personal catering service, as if my life, my work didn't exist. I tightened my grip on the phone. Sarah's networking group. Of course. My younger sister worked in PR. Every gathering was a chance for her to make connections and for me to play the part of unpaid staff. Mom, I began, but she bulldozed right over me. Your sister's making important connections that benefit this family. You should be grateful to help. Her words were knives wrapped in velvet, sharp and soft at the same time. I'd been cut by them for years. It's not like you have anything else going on. I glanced at my laptop where the glowing email from Victoria Chen, CEO of Pinnacle Hospitality, sat waiting. If only my mother knew. Use the good china, she continued briskly. These aren't your usual crowd, Lily. These are people who matter. People who matter, unlike me. She hung up without a goodbye. The silence in my apartment felt too loud. I stared at my plane ticket to Florida departure, 8:00 p.m. the next evening. It was supposed to be a new chapter. A big step. But here was my mother again, trying to drag me back into the same role I'd played for 15 years. A role I'd never auditioned for, but had been cast into the moment my sister was born. I sat on the edge of my bed and let the memories rise uninvited. Christmas after Christmas. Me in the kitchen apron, Sarah in her glittering dresses. My father raising a toast to our bright star, my mother laughing proudly, and me hovering near the doorway holding a tray no one thanked me for. I remembered the last Thanksgiving before I moved out. My mother introducing Sarah as our successful daughter in PR, while I stood nearby, smile plastered on my face, my name reduced to a footnote. Lily's here too, she'd said. She's helping out. I'd spent 14 hours preparing appetizers for 200 people at Sarah's engagement party. I'd overheard a guest ask what I did for work. My mother had actually laughed. She doesn't have Sarah's social skills, she'd said, but she cooks well. I'd swallowed it like I always did, because what else could I do? No matter what I achieved, they never saw it. They didn't know about stellar events. They didn't know about the empire I'd quietly built over the last 5 years. 3 locations, 50 employees, luxury clients. They didn't know about the $500,000 contracts, the Forbes interest, the way my name was starting to carry weight in hospitality circles. They didn't know because they never asked. To them, I was still the daughter who never quite measured up. The one who should be grateful just to be in the kitchen. I walked to my closet and unzipped the leather folder that held my contract. Stellar Events gleamed in embossed gold at the top. It was mine. Every inch of it built without their money, without their permission, without their belief. I'd built it on late nights, early mornings, and every ounce of self-respect I'd had to stitch back together after years of being dismissed. I opened my phone again, a text from Sarah. Mom says you're cooking tomorrow. Don't screw it up. Important people will be there. I let out a small laugh, the kind that isn't really funny. If she only knew. Not this time, I whispered to the quiet room. The irony of it all hit me like a wave. For years, they'd built this false narrative around me, the failed daughter, the cook. I'd let it happen because it was easier to focus on building something real than fighting shadows. But this was the moment everything would shift. The first sign I should have left years ago was how they introduced me. I could still hear my father's voice from that country club dinner a month ago, Sarah's our success story. Lily's between opportunities. Between opportunities. That morning I'd signed a 6-figure deal, but to him, to them, I was still nothing. The second sign was the bedroom. My childhood room had been gutted and turned into storage for Sarah's overflow wardrobe, my trophies, my books, my memories shoved into boxes in the basement. Sarah, of course, had been given the entire 3rd floor, a walk-in closet, a home office. She needs the space, my mother had said. And me, I was the invisible daughter. I zipped my suitcase shut. Another text from Mom. Don't forget the truffle oil. These people have sophisticated palates. I almost laughed again. These people. As if I didn't cater for people like them every single week. She didn't know that I'd already catered events for CEOs like Victoria Chen, the very woman she was now fawning over for Sarah's sake. My family had no idea how successful I'd become, and honestly, for a long time I'd preferred it that way. Building in silence was my way of staying safe. But safety wasn't enough anymore. I opened my laptop and stared at the pinnacle contract. Clause 15.3 CEO presence required for all strategic planning sessions. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, a $2 million deal that would change everything, not just for me, but for every employee who'd believed in my vision when I was just a woman with a dream and a rented kitchen. Victoria Chen herself had written, Lily, your story of building without family backing is rare. I want to work with people who know what grit looks like. I'd spent years proving myself to the world while my own family pretended I was invisible. And now, fate had decided to make it personal. Because attached to my mother's email was the guest list for Sarah's dinner. Victoria Chen, CEO, Pinnacle Hospitality. My heart stopped for half a second. Of all the people in the world, of all the nights, Victoria was going to be at my parents' house, sitting at their table, expecting to be served by the family's unemployed daughter, the very same woman she was scheduled to meet as a CEO less than 24 hours later. The universe really did have a wicked sense of humor. Sarah's next text came in like clockwork. Victoria Chen will be there. She's huge in hospitality. I'm pitching her PR services. Don't embarrass me with your amateur cooking. Amateur. I'd catered Victoria's company retreat for 500 people last month. I sat down on the bed, the decision settling in my chest like a heavy stone. Stay and play the servant, or choose myself and everything I'd built. My Uber reminder pinged on my phone, pick up 6:30 p.m. JFK Airport. I looked at the menu, at the contract, at the ticket, and for the first time in my life the choice wasn't complicated. I called my mother. Finally, she snapped the moment she answered. I was starting to worry you weren't taking this seriously. Mom, I said softly, I can't do it. The silence on the other end was sharp. What do you mean you can't? I have a business trip. I'm flying to Florida tonight. She laughed. Not kindly, but with that cruel, disbelieving laugh she'd perfected over years. What possible business could you have? I have a meeting. Lily, stop being selfish. Your sister needs this. She has money. She can hire a caterer. With what money? Do you know how expensive that is? I bit my tongue. She was asking a woman who owned a luxury catering company if she knew how expensive catering was. The irony almost made me choke. Family comes first, she hissed. Or are you too selfish to understand that? I closed my eyes. I understand perfectly. Family comes first when you need something from me. How dare you? When's the last time you asked about my life, Mom? We know about your life, she snapped. You're between jobs living in that tiny apartment. I inhaled deeply. I'm a CEO. A pause. Then a laugh, low and cruel. A CEO of what, your imaginary company? It's not imaginary, I said softly. I have 50 employees. Lily, she said coldly, enough with the fantasies. Sarah needs this. You owe us. I looked at the suitcase, at the life I'd built for myself, at everything I'd given up for their comfort. I owe you nothing. If you leave, she said finally, voice icy, don't bother coming back. Usually that threat worked. Usually it would send me scrambling to obey. But this time I just whispered, then I guess this is goodbye. And I hung up. For the first time in 15 years, the shaking in my hands wasn't fear. It was freedom. My phone buzzed like a swarm of angry bees the moment I hung up, but I didn't pick up. I already knew what it was. Sarah's frantic texts, my mother's escalating fury, maybe even the rare interjection from my father, who usually floated through family conflicts like smoke, never touching anything, never burning. For years, I'd always answered. I'd always folded. But not this time. I set the phone face down on the counter, letting the silence stretch around me like a shield. It felt foreign at first to choose myself over them. Unnatural. Almost dangerous. But beneath that sharp edge of fear was something else. Something warm, steady, alive. I finished packing slowly, deliberately, as if every folded shirt, every zipped pocket was another brick laid on the foundation of a life I was finally claiming as mine. For years, I'd told myself that if I just worked harder, if I was more useful, they'd love me the way they loved Sarah. If I kept being their reliable one, their invisible backbone, they'd look at me with pride. I'd cooked their meals, planned their events, mended their chaos, and still I'd been a footnote in their story. But I wasn't a footnote anymore. I was the author now. My assistant James had texted earlier to confirm my arrival at the Pinnacle Resort. I opened the message again. Victoria's team is excited to meet you in person. This is going to be big. I smiled faintly. They saw me. My employees saw me. My clients saw me. It was only my own family who had chosen to be blind. Another buzz. Sarah again. What did you just do? Mom's losing it. Get over here now. Stop being dramatic. It's Christmas, Lily. Don't ruin this. Victoria Chen is going to be here. Do you even understand what that means? I stared at the messages for a long moment, then turned my phone off completely. The sound of that last click, the dark screen, felt like unclenching a fist I'd been holding since I was 17. 2 hours later, my Uber would take me to JFK. In 24 hours, I would be seated across from Victoria Chen in a private dining room, finalizing a contract that would redefine my company's future. And at the exact same time, my mother would be serving a room full of executives, a meal that I would not cook for her. And that was the point. The next morning would be the first Christmas Eve in 15 years where I wasn't wearing an apron. I made a small list and left it on my kitchen counter, not for them, but out of habit, I suppose. I wrote down the numbers of 3 catering companies I knew could handle emergencies on short notice. And beneath it, I left a single business card. Lily Sullivan, CEO, Stellar Events. Not that they'd ever use it, not that they'd ever even set foot in my apartment, but a part of me wanted it there. Proof. A quiet, elegant way of saying I exist beyond your kitchen. The night passed in a blur of motion. The crisp click of my suitcase wheels against the floor. The soft hum of the city outside my window. The weight of old rolls slipping off my shoulders like a coat that had grown too heavy. I'd spent so long craving their approval, but the truth hit me as the Uber pulled away toward the airport. I didn't need it anymore. I arrived at JFK early, the kind of early that comes from years of anxiety of being told not to mess things up. Except this time, I wasn't arriving to serve anyone. I was arriving for myself, for my company, for the woman I had fought tooth and nail to become. On the plane, I opened my laptop to review the presentation one last time. My hands moved with the calm precision of someone who'd built her own empire brick by brick. For 5 years, I'd built stellar events in silence. No family name, no inherited wealth, no safety net. Every decision, every sleepless night, every client won over was mine. And the person my family called unemployed was about to close a $2 million deal. The plane lifted off at exactly 8:07 p.m. I watched the city shrink beneath me, the winter lights blurring into soft gold. Somewhere below, my mother was probably calling every cousin, spinning her familiar story, Lily's being selfish again. My sister was probably throwing a tantrum because no one else could fix things like I could. They'd panic, they'd scramble, they'd make me the villain in their story. But for the first time, I didn't care. Freedom didn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it came in the quiet of a night flight, with the soft rustle of paper and the steady beat of your own heart. Hours later, when I checked my phone at the hotel, there were 47 missed calls from my mother, 18 from Sarah, and even 3 from my father. But I ignored them all. Instead, I focused on the email sitting at the top of my inbox. From Victoria Chen. Looking forward to finally meeting you in person, Lily. I've been following stellar events for 2 years. Your reputation precedes you. I smiled as I set my bag down in the suite. The hotel had arranged a stunning, welcome, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlantic, a bottle of champagne waiting on ice, a handwritten note from Victoria herself. My reflection in the glass looked different that night. Lighter, taller somehow. The woman staring back wasn't the maid in the kitchen anymore. She was the CEO. I slept soundly that night, the kind of deep sleep that doesn't visit you often when you grow up trying to be enough for people who will never see you. While I slept, chaos bloomed like wildfire back in Connecticut. When I woke up, my phone was flooded with texts. From Sarah, timestamped 6:18 p.m. Mom's freaking out. There's nothing ready. Where are you? 6:34 p.m. She's calling every restaurant nearby. Everything's closed. 7:02 p.m. Guests are arriving. Mom's red in the face. 7:23 p.m. We're ordering pizza. Pizza Lily. 7:47 p.m. Mom just told everyone you're unreliable, that this is all your fault. 9:33 p.m. The party's over. Victoria left early. Mom says you're dead to her. I read the messages slowly, almost serenely, like I was watching someone else's storm from behind a thick pane of glass. For years, I'd been at the center of their chaos. Now, for the first time, I was outside it. I wasn't their scapegoat or their solution, I was just me. The next day, I met Victoria Chen. The pre-dinner meeting was scheduled for 7:00 p.m. at the Pinnacle Resort. Soft golden lighting, quiet music, the kind of place that whispered power instead of shouting it. I arrived early, wearing a black suit that made me feel like my bones were made of steel. My hair was neat, my hands steady, my heart sure. Victoria walked in 10 minutes late, her hair swept into an elegant bun, her steps sharp but not rushed. She was the kind of woman who didn't need to raise her voice to own a room. She shook my hand warmly, but there was a trace of amusement in her eyes. "I have to apologize," she said, laughing lightly as she set her bag down. "I just came from the most bizarre Christmas Eve party." I tilted my head, feigning polite curiosity. "Oh, you won't believe this," she said, still laughing. I was invited to what was supposed to be an elegant dinner party. The hostess, Margaret Sullivan. I think funny coincidence with the last name promised this elaborate home-cooked meal. We arrived to find utter chaos. No food, nothing. They ended up serving pizza on Waterford crystal. My pulse remained even, but inside something cold and electric bloomed beneath my ribs. I sipped my water. "That must have been awkward," I murmured. "It gets worse," she said, lowering her voice like she was letting me in on a delicious secret. The hostess spent the entire evening bad-mouthing her older daughter, called her unreliable, a disappointment. Apparently, this daughter was supposed to cook everything and just vanished. It was a spectacle. She shook her head, still smiling at the absurdity of it. Honestly, I left early. It was embarrassing. I smiled faintly, not giving myself away. Not yet. Some families, I said softly, have very strange dynamics. She laughed again. That's one way to put it. And right then, in that elegant dining room, something inside me shifted permanently. The girl they had called worthless was sitting across from the woman they had hoped to impress as her equal. No, not just as her equal. As someone Victoria wanted to partner with. I didn't need to say a word about my family that night. I didn't need to justify myself. Because the best part of revenge, the sweetest, most satisfying part, isn't the explosion. It's the quiet, elegant reveal that happens when the truth speaks for itself. And mine was just beginning to speak. The next morning was crisp and clear, the kind of winter day where the sun cuts through the air like glass. I woke before dawn, not because of nerves, but because of a strange, calm certainty that had settled into my bones overnight. My presentation was ready, the contract printed, my team on standby. All the years of working in silence, all the nights building something no one in my family had cared to notice, it had all led to this. I stood in front of the mirror in the hotel bathroom, adjusting the lapel of my blazer. It wasn't just fabric and thread. It was armor. It was proof. I'd chosen a deep navy suit with subtle gold accents. Strong, clean, deliberate. The woman staring back at me looked nothing like the girl who'd spent her youth hunched over a stove at family parties trying to be good enough. She looked like someone who no longer asked for permission to exist. My phone lay silent on the counter, 47 missed calls from my mother, 26 from Sarah. Even my father had broken his usual silence with 4 unanswered attempts. I'd ignored them all. There was nothing left to say. When I stepped into the Pinnacle boardroom a few hours later, the air was electric. Victoria Chen sat at the head of the long glass table, composed as always. Her team operations legal strategy were already flipping through briefing folders. The Pinnacle logo glowed softly on the big screen behind them. I'd walked into boardrooms before, but this one felt different. Not because of the deal's size, because of the truth hovering just beneath its polished surface. They thought I was just another CEO here to talk business. But I was also the invisible daughter of the woman who had tried to impress Victoria with pizza on Christmas Eve. Lily Victoria greeted warmly, rising from her chair. "Good morning. Ready to make history?" I smiled steady, absolutely. The presentation unfolded smoothly, almost rhythmically. Years of pitching, of proving myself to clients who underestimated me, had honed my voice into something controlled yet magnetic. My slides were clean and sharp, my data airtight. I spoke not just as someone seeking a contract, but as someone who owned her worth. I caught the way Victoria's expression shifted as I spoke. Respect, confidence, connection. It was everything my mother had never looked at me with. And then at the exact moment my closing slide faded into the Pinnacle logo, something unexpected happened. Victoria's assistant walked into the boardroom holding an iPad. Her steps were fast, and there was a faint flicker of surprise on her face. She handed it to Victoria with a whisper. Victoria glanced at the screen. First confusion, then realization. And then something like shock flickered across her usually composed face. She looked up at me, then back at the iPad, then at me again. "Lily," she began slowly. "This photo is from the Sullivan House in Connecticut." My breath caught in my throat. I already knew. She turned the iPad toward me, and there it was. A LinkedIn post that had started to go viral overnight. Someone, probably one of the guests from that Christmas Eve dinner, had posted a photo of my mother's grand dining table surrounded by elegantly dressed guests and pizza boxes. My mother, Margaret Sullivan, flushed and furious, was frozen mid-excuse. The caption read something along the lines of, "When your elegant dinner turns into a pizza party, networking gone wrong." And there in the background of another photo hanging on the wall, the one they'd taken years ago at Thanksgiving, was me. Not front and center like Sarah. In the corner, holding a tray, half-shadowed, forgettable. But unmistakably me. Victoria looked at me carefully. "Is this you?" I held her gaze. "Yes." "Margaret Sullivan is your mother." "Yes." The room fell silent. Her team shifted slightly, exchanging glances. Even the legal counsel put down his pen. "She's the hostess from last night," Victoria said quietly, as if fitting puzzle pieces together in real time. the one who spent the entire evening calling her older daughter unreliable and mentally unstable. She paused. That was you. I nodded once calm. Victoria leaned back slowly, almost incredulous. So let me get this straight. The woman who served me Papa John's on Waterford Crystal last night has no idea that the daughter she was insulting runs the company I've been trying to partner with for 2 years. She doesn't, I said softly. She's never asked. Victoria blinked then. To my surprise, she laughed. Not a polite laugh. A real unrestrained laugh. Oh my God. Her business partner James raised a brow. Wait, so the so-called unreliable daughter is actually the CEO of Stellar Events? Victoria finished for him, still laughing. The same woman who's about to sign a $2 million contract with us. I stayed silent. I didn't need to defend myself. The truth was doing it for me. Victoria opened Google on the iPad, typed in my name, and tilted the screen toward the team. Up came the Hospitality magazine, features the Wall Street Journal piece, the James Beard nomination, the Forbes teaser. My name, my work, my empire. She looked at me again. And your family doesn't know about any of this. They don't know anything I said. They never cared to. Before anyone could respond, the assistant rushed back into the room. Ms. Chen, she said breathlessly. Forbes just dropped the cover preview for tomorrow's 40 Under 40. You're going to want to see this. She cast it onto the boardroom screen, and there it was, my face. From invisible to invaluable, how Lily Sullivan built a luxury catering empire without a dollar of family money. The room went completely still. Even Victoria composed as she was let out a soft wow. James let out a low whistle. I think Christmas came early for karma. I almost laughed at that. It wasn't vindictive laughter. It was something quieter, more final. Because I hadn't needed to expose anyone. I'd just lived my truth. And the world was finally seeing it. Victoria leaned forward, folding her hands on the table. Lily, you realize your family is going to wake up to this tomorrow. I do. She tilted her head, studying me. And you're ready for that? I let the silence breathe. It wasn't an easy silence. It was thick, full of years of hurt, invisibility, neglect. But beneath it there was strength. I met her gaze. I've been ready for this my whole life. Victoria smiled slowly. Then she picked up her phone and dialed a number. My blood ran cold when I saw the name flash on her screen. Margaret Sullivan, she said out loud, almost playfully. Let's make this interesting. My pulse thrummed in my ears. Victoria. She held up a hand, mouthing, trust me. The room listened to the call on speaker. It rang twice before my mother picked up. Hello? Her voice was tight, brittle, the voice of a woman trying desperately to hold on to a reputation slipping through her fingers. Mrs. Sullivan, this is Victoria Chen, she said smoothly. We met last night at your pizza party. I heard the sharp inhale on the other end. Oh, Ms. Chen, yes, of course. I'm so sorry again about the dinner. My daughter can be unreliable. Victoria finished for her sweet as honey. My mother's silence was sharp enough to cut glass. I just wanted to inform you, Victoria continued, that I've just signed a $2 million contract with the most talented entrepreneur I've met in years. Stellar Events. Their CEO is a woman I admire deeply. That's wonderful, my mother said carefully, clearly trying to sound gracious. We're always proud to support hardworking people. Funny you should say that, Victoria said lightly, because that woman is your daughter, Lily Sullivan. The sound my mother made then, I'll never forget it. It was as if all the air had been punched out of her chest. A hollow, stunned exhale that hung in the air like smoke. Victoria ended the call without another word. She didn't need to say more. My phone lit up immediately with dozens of calls and texts from my family, but I ignored them. Victoria leaned back, grinning like she'd just watched a plot twist in a movie. Ms. Sullivan, she said, extending her hand. Let's sign this contract. I shook her hand, firm and steady, as flashbulbs of everything I'd endured played silently behind my eyes every Christmas Eve, every dismissive laugh, every moment they'd looked through me. And as my pen met the paper, my father's text appeared on my screen. Your mother just fainted. What the hell is Stellar Events? I signed the last page and slid the contract back to Victoria. I'd spent my life serving their table. Today I built my own. The champagne cork popped softly against the ceiling of the Pinnacle boardroom, the sound somehow both celebratory and strangely intimate. Victoria handed me a crystal flute, and as I accepted it, my phone continued to vibrate silently on the table beside the signed contract. Dozens of calls, Dozens of messages. I didn't need to check them to know what they said. I could already hear the chorus of my mother's voice in my head, the outrage, the disbelief, the sudden panic at losing control of the story she'd carefully crafted for years. But for once, that voice wasn't inside me anymore. It was just noise. Victoria raised her glass. To boundaries, she said, eyes glinting with something halfway between amusement and admiration. And to poetic justice. To poetic justice, I echoed. The team clinked glasses, and as the bubbles slid down my throat, something inside me settled into place like a puzzle piece finally finding the shape it was made for. All those years they'd called me a failure, invisible background decoration. All those years I'd played the role they assigned me just to keep the peace. And now, here I was, standing at the head of my own empire while their carefully polished facade was crumbling in real time. My phone buzzed again. I finally glanced down. The preview of my mother's message glared up at me. "Mom, answer your phone now." Then Sarah. "Sarah, is this some kind of sick joke? Victoria just posted a photo? What the hell is going on, Lily?" And then my father. "Dad, your mother is hysterical. Please call her." I didn't. Victoria leaned toward me, still amused. "Would you like to make it official?" She was already holding up her phone. A photo snapped in an instant, me at the table, Pinnacle executives on either side, the signed contract in my hand. She typed something quickly. "Thrilled to announce a landmark partnership between Pinnacle Hospitality and Stellar Events, led by the brilliant CEO, Lily Sullivan. Building something extraordinary without shortcuts, without privilege, only talent and grit. Here's to redefining excellence together." She tagged me. She tagged Pinnacle. And with deliberate precision, she tagged my mother. I didn't stop her. Within minutes, likes and comments began rolling in. Congratulatory messages from past clients. Mentions from industry peers. People I'd once only dreamed of working with were now quoting the post, calling me visionary, inspiring a woman who built without permission. And on the other side of the country club fence, in a house that had once been my prison, my mother's social world was burning. The first call I actually answered was Sarah's. Her voice was sharp, brittle, like glass about to crack. "Lily, tell me this isn't real." "It's real," I said evenly, "very real." "You've been a CEO this whole time," she demanded. "For 5 years." "Yes. Why didn't you tell us?" I let out a quiet laugh, not out of humor, but out of the absurdity of the question. "Because you never asked Sarah. Not once." She hesitated, and I could hear the tremor in her breathing. "Mom's having a breakdown. Everyone's talking. The country club group chat is exploding. Victoria's post is everywhere. That's not my problem anymore." "How can you be so cold?" she snapped. I glanced at the contract beside me, at the gold lettering on the cover of the Forbes mock-up my PR manager had sent. "I'm not cold, Sarah. I'm just done being invisible until you need me to cook." Her silence stretched long on the line. And for the first time, I heard something in her voice I hadn't heard before. Not entitlement, not arrogance, just fear. "But we're family. Family doesn't treat each other like servants," I said quietly. "Family doesn't erase someone's worth because it doesn't fit their story." "I didn't," she started, but her voice broke. "You did," I said gently but firmly. "You all did." When I hung up, Victoria was watching me with that same assessing look she'd worn during the pitch. "I've seen a lot of power moves in my career," she said slowly. "But this is a masterpiece." "It wasn't a power move," I replied softly. "It was survival." She nodded, understanding. "That's what makes it powerful." I didn't answer my mother's calls that day. I didn't need to. Her panic came through loud and clear in every message. By noon, she'd gone from demanding to pleading, from furious to frantic. She had built her world on the image of Sarah, the successful golden child, and me, the quiet failure she could both control and pity. Now that world was collapsing. Her friends were calling her reputation was unraveling, and worst of all, the woman she'd dismissed as a nobody was now the name on everyone's lips. The Forbes article went live at midnight. I didn't need to announce it. The world did it for me. From invisible to invaluable. How Lily Sullivan built a luxury catering empire without a dollar of family money. The opening lines painted the picture. She was the overlooked daughter in a family of privilege. Now she's the face of a hospitality empire redefining the industry. They quoted me directly. "I built in silence because I learned early that some people only hear your worth once the world repeats it back to them." Within hours it was trending. I imagined my mother sitting in that pristine living room, clutching a magazine with my face on the cover. The same room where she'd laughed at me in front of guests. I imagined her realizing the daughter she'd dismissed wasn't just successful, she was unreachable now. Sarah texted again the next morning. Sarah Pinnacle just canceled our PR contract. Victoria said they don't work with people who lack family values. Mom lost her charity board seat. Dad's golf buddies are laughing. This is a nightmare. I read it slowly, deliberately. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I didn't feel guilt. Just a quiet ache, the kind you feel when the truth finally breaks the surface after being buried for too long. My father called again that afternoon. I let it ring 4 times before answering. His voice was low, tired in a way I'd never heard before. Lily. Dad, I need to say something. There was a long pause as if the words were dragging themselves out of him. I knew. Not everything. But I knew you'd registered a business. Years ago. I saw the paperwork. I should have said something. Why didn't you? He exhaled shakily. Because it was easier to let your mother's version of things stand than to fight it. She's always been louder than me. And I thought you were fine. Fine. The word tasted bitter. You let her turn me into a servant in my own home. I know. His voice cracked just a little. And I'm ashamed of that. You built something incredible. And we didn't just miss it, we ignored it. That's on us. There it was. The first crack in the wall of silence he'd built around himself for 15 years. Dad, I said quietly, I didn't do any of this to hurt you. I know, he said. We hurt ourselves. We created a story where Sarah was the star and you were the background. And now everyone can see how blind we were. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the view from my Manhattan office window, the skyline glowing against the night. For years, I'd stared out at these same buildings and wondered if I'd ever truly belong anywhere. But this time, I didn't feel like a stranger looking in. I was part of the city now. It was mine. He hesitated again. The pizza disaster is already a country club legend. They're calling it the night the Sullivans served Papa John's. Despite myself, a soft laugh escaped my throat. Of course they were. The weeks that followed were like living in a mirror world. While my family's social standing fractured, my business soared. The Forbes cover brought in a wave of new inquiries, partnerships, speaking invitations. High-end clients who had once ignored me were now fighting for space on my calendar. I'd worked for years to build stellar events brick by brick, but this was the moment the world decided to pay attention. Victoria became not just a partner, but a quiet ally. At every industry event, she told the story with that twinkle of dark humor in her eyes. They served me pizza on Waterford Crystal, while their CEO daughter was signing a multi-million-dollar deal with me the next day. People laughed, but they also remembered. My name stuck. Some nights alone in my apartment, I thought about my mother. About all the Christmases I'd spent in her kitchen, hands burning from hot trays, heart burning from being invisible. I didn't hate her. I'd stopped needing her approval a long time ago. But I couldn't pretend anymore either. She'd chosen blindness, and blindness has consequences. One evening, I opened my phone and found a text from her. Just 2 words. Mom, we need to talk. I stared at it for a long time. Then I archived it without replying. I wasn't ready to be their maid again. I wasn't ready to shrink so they could feel comfortable. I was Lily Sullivan, CEO of Stellar Events. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. 3 months after the night, everything changed. The air between me and my family was colder than a Connecticut winter. Not hateful, not burning with the kind of fury that flares up and dies. No, this was a still, quiet cold. The kind that settles into old walls and lingers like frost that never melts. We hadn't spoken beyond a few strained texts since the Forbes cover dropped. My father had called twice short, faltering calls where guilt tangled in every syllable. Sarah sent scattered messages that swung wildly between apology and resentment. My mother didn't call at all. She sent clipped, brittle texts like tiny, sharpened knives. We need to talk. This has gone too far. You've humiliated us. I didn't answer. Not out of cruelty, but out of self-preservation. I'd spent too many years swallowing my own worth to make her comfortable. But silence has a strange way of echoing back. It forces things to the surface, things you can't hide forever. And eventually one text came through that was different. Dad, we'd like to meet. Just talk. Neutral ground. Manhattan. Neutral ground. My territory. The irony wasn't lost on me. For decades, I'd been the one summoned back to their house. Their rules, their hierarchy, their golden daughter. This time they were asking to come to me. I agreed. We met in a quiet corner of a restaurant overlooking Central Park. Not the kind of flashy place my mother liked to parade her pearls in. This one was elegant, understated, private. When I arrived, they were already seated. Sarah's posture was stiff, nervous. My father looked tired, shoulders slightly bowed as if carrying weight he could no longer ignore. My mother, she looked older. Not physically, though the lines around her mouth were more pronounced, but inside. Like the scaffolding of her certainty had cracked. The hostess greeted me with warmth, addressing me by name. "Good evening, Ms. Sullivan. Your table is ready." My mother flinched at the Ms. Sullivan. It used to belong to her. I walked to the table slowly, deliberately, not as a dutiful daughter, but as a woman stepping into a space that finally belonged to her. They stood halfway to greet me, unsure whether to hug or not. I didn't offer it. I sat down, let the silence stretch. Before anyone spoke, I took a folded sheet of paper from my bag and placed it on the table between us. "These are my terms," I said evenly. Sarah blinked. "Terms." My mother frowned, her jaw tightening. "Lily, please don't interrupt me," I said softly. But my voice held enough weight that she froze. My father's eyes flickered with something like shame. "Lily, what is this?" I looked at all of them. The family that raised me. The people who reduced me to a pair of hands in their kitchen. The ones who laughed when I mentioned work, who made my childhood bedroom a closet for Sarah's wardrobe, who told themselves a story so many times they forgot it was a lie. "This is what it takes," I said quietly, "if we're going to have any kind of relationship again." They leaned forward, reading the paper. Equal respect or no contact. No more servant treatment, ever. Public acknowledgement of my success. A real apology. Not the kind you give to save face, the kind that costs something. Therapy. Family and individual, non-negotiable. The silence that followed was thick. My mother stared at the list like it was a foreign language. Sarah's lip trembled. My father exhaled slowly like a man who'd finally run out of excuses. "I'm not your maid," I said quietly. "I'm not your background character. I will not sit in your kitchen ever again while you pretend I don't exist. If you want me in your lives, you meet me as equals, or not at all." Sarah was the first to speak, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Lily, we've lost everything." "That's not my responsibility," I replied. "I know," she whispered. "I was jealous of you. I think I always was. But Mom made me feel special by making you small." She faltered, blinking rapidly. "I went along with it because it was easier." That confession, for all its messiness, hit me harder than I expected. Not because it shocked me, but because it was the first time she'd ever said it out loud. The first time she'd stopped pretending to be the golden child and admitted she'd been part of the performance. My father cleared his throat. "Lily, I've spent a long time pretending I didn't see what was happening. I thought staying out of it kept the peace, but it just made me complicit." His voice cracked on that last word. "I let your mother dictate the narrative. I let Sarah shine while you carried everything in silence. I am so ashamed." For years I'd wanted those words, begged for them in silence. And now that they were here, they didn't fix anything, but they mattered. They were a beginning. Then came my mother. Her hands were clenched tightly on the edge of the table. She didn't look at me at first, just stared at the folded list like it was a mirror she didn't want to face. Finally, in a small voice I barely recognized as hers, she said, "I'm sorry." I almost didn't believe her. Margaret Sullivan never apologized. She justified, she explained, she commanded, but this wasn't that voice. This was a woman whose empire of control had cracked. She lifted her eyes to mine. "Not just for Christmas Eve, for all of it. For 15 years of treating you like help. Because the truth is, Lily, I couldn't bear the idea of you being more successful than the version of you I'd created. I built a story where Sarah was the star. You were supposed to stay small." I didn't speak. I didn't rush to comfort her. I let the words hang there, sharp and true. My father reached out, not to touch but to steady himself. "We've paid the price, Lily. The country club, the boards, the PR firm. It's all gone." I folded my hands on the table. "This isn't about punishment. This is about boundaries. I don't need you to like the woman I've become, but I need you to respect her." Sarah wiped at her eyes. "We will, I promise." My mother swallowed hard, looking at me with something that for the first time might have been real humility. I'll go to therapy. That surprised me more than anything else. I nodded once. Then maybe we can rebuild, but it will be different this time. I'll be your daughter, not your servant. Your sister, not your staff. 6 months later, I hosted my first family dinner in my apartment. My real home. Not their house, not their rules, my territory. They walked into my living room cautiously, almost reverently, like people stepping onto foreign soil. My mother's gaze swept over the space, the soft lighting, the expansive view of Central Park, the kind of quiet elegance she'd once thought I wasn't capable of. For a moment, her lips trembled, as if she was realizing just how far outside her version of me this reality had grown. I didn't cook. My team from Stellar Events handled everything, moving gracefully through the space, in crisp uniforms, serving a 5-course dinner like a scene out of a high-end magazine. My employees addressed me as boss, not Lily, and I didn't shrink from it. Not this time. Sarah looked almost stunned watching them work. My father kept glancing at me with quiet pride. My mother didn't speak for most of the meal. She just looked at me, not through me, not over me. At the end of dinner, I raised my glass. I want to make something clear, I said softly, but my voice filled the room. Success doesn't need permission, and self-worth doesn't need family approval. Respect is not a favor, it's a baseline. My mother's eyes glistened. She nodded once slowly. She had apologized publicly at the country club, admitted her blindness. It didn't fix her reputation, but it cracked her armor. She was trying in her own imperfect way. Sarah's PR firm had taken a brutal hit, but she'd slowly started rebuilding, humbler now, more grounded. My father had stepped out of my mother's shadow. For the first time, I saw him as a man, not just a silent shape in the background. We weren't healed, but we weren't what we were either. As my employees cleared the plates, my mother spoke quietly. You built all this without us. Yes, I said, without you. She nodded, and maybe that's why it's so strong. I didn't smile, but I felt something small and warm settle in my chest. Not forgiveness, but truth. I looked out at the city lights glittering against the dark glass. All those years of being invisible had forged a woman who didn't need their applause. But now, if they wanted to see me, really see me, I would allow it, on my terms. Because I was no longer the daughter in the kitchen. I was Lily Sullivan, CEO, builder, survivor. And finally, I was visible. If my story resonates with you, if you've ever had to choose yourself over someone else's version of you, know this. Your worth isn't defined by who fails to see it. Your light doesn't dim just because someone refuses to look. If you believe that too, share this story. Like, comment, subscribe. You never know who might need to hear that they're not invisible.